The War of 1812 remains one of the most curious, yet often forgotten, conflicts in American history. While it might not capture the collective American imagination in the same way as the American Revolution or the Civil War, it was nonetheless a pivotal moment that shaped the future of both the United States and its northern neighbor, Canada. What's fascinating about this war are the lesser-known facts that reveal its complexity, irony, and profound impact on North America. Below are 10 surprising aspects of the War of 1812 that you may not have known, each with its own dramatic twist that will draw you deeper into the intrigue of this conflict. One of the most striking facts about the War of 1812 is that the United States invaded Canada, not once but multiple times. This act is largely overlooked in American history, where the narrative focuses more on the defense of American territory and naval battles. Yet, the U.S. invasions of Canada, motivated by the belief that Canadians would welcome the Americans as liberators, stand as a testament to the audacity and overconfidence of the U.S. leadership. The irony? Rather than greeting the Americans with open arms, Canadians, particularly those of British and French descent, rallied together to repel the invasions, solidifying a sense of national unity and identity. In a poetic twist, the War of 1812 did more to forge Canadian nationalism than it did to promote American expansionism. The invasion of Canada was not just a military blunder, it was a political miscalculation. American leaders expected that the largely British-descended Canadians would rise up against their colonial rulers and support the U.S. cause. They couldn't have been more wrong. Instead of embracing the American troops as liberators, the Canadians fought back fiercely, defending their land with surprising tenacity. The American assumption that the Canadians would defect proved disastrous, leading to humiliating defeats and the burning of American hopes for conquest. In retrospect, this overconfidence seems almost absurd, and yet it highlights the arrogance and naivety that often accompany wartime decisions. As for the Americans back home, they had their own internal struggles to contend with. The War of 1812 nearly tore the United States apart from within, with New England on the verge of secession. Frustrated by the economic hardships imposed by the British blockade and disillusioned by the federal government's conduct of the war, New England leaders convened at the Hartford Convention in 1814 to discuss the possibility of breaking away from the Union. It was a stark reminder that national unity, even in the face of foreign conflict, was not a given. Although the secession did not come to fruition, the fact that it was seriously considered during the war shows how divided the young nation was. Washington, D.C., the fledgling nation's capital, faced one of its darkest moments during the war when British forces stormed the city in 1814 and set fire to many of its iconic buildings, including the Capitol and the White House. The scene was one of chaos and devastation, with smoke billowing across the skyline and the American government scrambling to relocate. For a moment, it seemed as though Washington, D.C. might be abandoned entirely, and there was serious consideration of moving the capital to another location. Imagine the sheer disbelief and horror that gripped the nation as the very heart of its government lay in ashes. Yet, against all odds, Washington was not abandoned, and the city rose from the ashes, a symbol of resilience and defiance in the face of catastrophe. Another intriguing aspect of the War of 1812 is that it gave rise to some of the most enduring symbols of American patriotism. One such symbol is the Star-Spangled Banner, which was written by Francis Scott Key during the bombardment of Fort McHenry in 1814. The sight of the American flag still flying over the fort inspired Key to pen the poem that would eventually become the national anthem. Similarly, the USS Constitution, affectionately known as Old Ironsides, became a national icon after its victories over British ships during the war. These symbols, born out of a conflict that many Americans barely remember, continue to evoke pride and patriotism, even though their origins are tied to a war that nearly saw the nation's capital burned to the ground. Canada, on the other hand, views the War of 1812 very differently. While Americans may regard it as a minor chapter in their history, Canadians see it as a defining moment that helped shape their national identity. In fact, the war's bicentennial was a much bigger deal in Canada than in the United States. While an ambivalent U.S. Congress declined to even create a National Bicentennial Commission, the Canadian government poured nearly $30 million into commemorating the war, including the dedication of a new National War Monument. For Canadians, the War of 1812 is not just a historical footnote. It is a source of national pride and a symbol of their ability to stand up to American aggression. One particularly interesting note is that the British forces in Canada were bolstered by an unexpected group of allies, Native American tribes. These tribes, including the Shawnee led by the famous warrior Tecumseh, played a crucial role in defending Canada against the American invasions. Tecumseh, in particular, became a symbol of Native American resistance and is remembered as a hero in Canada, despite being viewed with suspicion and hostility by American settlers. His death in battle in 1813 was a significant blow to the Native American alliance, but his legacy lives on, particularly in Canadian history. The war also had surprising consequences for African Americans. While the conflict is often remembered for its impact on U.S.-British relations and the shaping of Canadian identity, it also played a role in the struggle for freedom by enslaved African Americans. Thousands of enslaved people escaped from plantations in the South during the war, seeking refuge with the British, who promised them freedom in exchange for their support. Many of these escapees went on to serve in the British military or settle in Canada after the war, forever altering the demographics of both countries. Despite the many ironies and unexpected turns of the War of 1812, perhaps the most enduring legacy of the conflict is its role in shaping the borders and identities of the nations involved. While the war did not result in significant territorial changes, it solidified the United States' sovereignty and reinforced Canada's sense of national unity. For the British, it was a sideshow to the much larger Napoleonic Wars. But for the Americans and Canadians, it was a war that shaped their futures in profound ways. In conclusion, the War of 1812 may not be the most well-remembered conflict in American history, but it was filled with dramatic twists and turns that forever altered the course of North American history. From the failed American invasions of Canada to the near secession of New England and the burning of Washington, D.C., the war was a chaotic and unpredictable chapter that left a lasting impact on the nations involved. Whether viewed as a fight for survival or an unnecessary conflict, the War of 1812 stands as a testament to the resilience of both the United States and Canada in the face of adversity. Political and military leaders in the United States entered the War of 1812 with a startling sense of overconfidence, particularly regarding their ambitions to conquer Canada. With the British deeply entangled in the Napoleonic Wars in Europe, American leaders saw an opportunity to expand their borders northward, assuming that the conquest of Canada, a British colony with a population just a fraction of the size of the U.S., would be a swift and easy victory. Former President Thomas Jefferson, whose influence still loomed large over American politics, famously claimed that taking Canada would be a mere matter of marching. It was a sentiment echoed by other prominent figures of the time, including U.S. Secretary of War William Eustis, who boldly declared, "We can take Canada without soldiers. We have only to send officers into the provinces, and the people, disaffected toward their own government, will rally around our standard." But this assumption of Canadian discontent could not have been further from the truth. Rather than greeting the Americans as liberators, the Canadians, many of whom were British loyalists or descendants of French settlers, banded together in defense of their homeland. Far from rallying to the American cause, Canadians took up arms to defend their territory from what they saw as an unprovoked invasion. In one of the great ironies of the war, the very act of trying to conquer Canada helped solidify its national identity, as Canadians of all backgrounds united to repel the Yankee invaders. What the American leadership had envisioned as a short and triumphant campaign turned into a protracted and frustrating struggle, with U.S. forces suffering a series of humiliating defeats at the hands of the British and their Canadian and Native American allies. One of the most enduring images from the War of 1812 is that of Laura Secord, a figure often compared to Paul Revere for her role in warning British forces of an impending American attack. Born in Massachusetts and the daughter of a Revolutionary War patriot, Secord might seem like an unlikely Canadian hero. Yet her actions during the war earned her a place in Canadian folklore and history. In June 1813, Laura Secord overheard American officers planning an attack on the British outpost at Beaver Dams. Determined to warn the British of the impending assault, Secord embarked on a treacherous 20-mile journey on foot through dense woods and enemy territory. Her bravery and determination helped save the British garrison from surprise attack, leading to a decisive victory at the Battle of Beaver Dams. Secord's story is a testament to the complex and often contradictory allegiances that characterized the War of 1812. Despite her American birth and familial ties to the Revolutionary War, she chose to side with the British and defend Canada against the very country of her birth. Her story highlights the fluid nature of national identity in the early 19th century, as well as the personal sacrifices made by ordinary people during times of war. Today, Laura Secord is celebrated as a Canadian heroine, with her name gracing everything from schools to a popular brand of chocolates. The failure of the American invasion of Canada was not only a military setback, but also a political embarrassment for the U.S. government. The war had been justified in part by the idea that it would be a quick and easy victory, one that would expand American territory and bolster national pride. Instead, the invasion turned into a humiliating quagmire, with American forces repeatedly repelled by the Canadians and their British allies. The Battle of Queenston Heights in 1812, for example, saw the Americans suffer a crushing defeat, with hundreds of soldiers either killed or captured. Despite initial gains, the Americans were ultimately unable to hold their ground, and the campaign to conquer Canada ended in failure. The Canadian defense was bolstered not only by the regular British Army, but also by local militias and Native American warriors. The alliance between the British and various Native American tribes, including the Shawnee under the leadership of the famous warrior Tecumseh, proved to be a formidable force against the American invaders. Tecumseh, in particular, played a crucial role in the defense of Canada, forging a powerful alliance with the British and leading Native American forces in several key battles. His leadership and military prowess were instrumental in the successful defense of Canada, and he remains a revered figure in Canadian history to this day. While the United States eventually abandoned its ambitions of conquering Canada, the war did have significant consequences for the future of North America. The Treaty of Ghent, which ended the war in 1814, largely restored the status quo, with neither side gaining or losing significant territory. However, the war left a lasting legacy in both the United States and Canada. For the Americans, it solidified their independence from Britain and gave rise to several iconic symbols of national pride, including the Star-Spangled Banner and the USS Constitution. For Canada, the war was a defining moment in the development of its national identity, as Canadians from diverse backgrounds came together to defend their land from foreign invasion. In many ways, the War of 1812 was a war of miscalculations and missed opportunities. The Americans underestimated the resolve of the Canadians and overestimated their ability to project power across the border. Meanwhile, the British, focused primarily on the Napoleonic Wars, saw the conflict in North America as a sideshow, yet they still managed to successfully defend their Canadian colonies. The war also exposed deep divisions within the United States, particularly in New England, where opposition to the war was so strong that some leaders even considered secession. Ultimately, the War of 1812 may be remembered as a minor conflict in the grand sweep of American history, but for Canada, it was a pivotal moment in the forging of a national identity. The failed American invasion, the resilience of the Canadian defenders, and the heroism of figures like Laura Secord all contributed to a sense of Canadian pride and unity that endures to this day. What began as a bold attempt by the United States to expand its borders ended in a humbling lesson about the limits of military power and the strength of national resolve. On the evening of June 21, 1813, the war between the United States and Great Britain seemed to be drawing ever closer to a tipping point in the dense wilderness of Canada. Amid the tension and uncertainty of battle, there emerged a story of quiet heroism, one that would etch the name of a brave woman into the annals of Canadian history. Laura Secord, the 37-year-old wife of a wounded Canadian Loyalist soldier and mother of 5, found herself thrust into the war's dangerous current. That evening, as she nursed her injured husband, Laura overheard American officers discussing a secret plan to launch a surprise attack on a British outpost near Beaver Dams. The fate of the British troops stationed there, and perhaps the very course of the war in that region, rested in her hands.